Ever get that feeling you're not alone, even when you are? Like something else is maybe lurking just beyond our perception.
Yeah, it's a primal fear, right? That the very place we consider our sanctuary could be harboring something unseen. And it's fascinating how that fear is rooted in personal experiences, stories passed down, or even just a gut feeling that something is just off.
Definitely a topic that sparks a ton of curiosity and debate, for sure. So today we're diving deep into a case that's both chilling and super intriguing. A house in Sheffield, England, that became notorious for its crazy, unexplained occurrences.
What makes this one really interesting is the sheer volume of paranormal activity reported by a bunch of different people over several years. Not just one isolated thing, but a pattern of strange and often terrifying events.
And it all starts with a young guy, William. He's 19, successful in his career, and buys his first home. A double house, dark brick, bay windows, needed some love but full of potential. Sounds pretty typical, right?
Except for the creepy encounter before he even moves in. Driving by the house with a friend, the friend sees an elderly woman in the bay window. But William, nothing. Just a quick but chilling glimpse of what's to come.
Yeah, talk about a red flag. And things get even creepier on move-in day when he meets the previous owner's mother. She gives him this warning. Something in this house is not right. Like she's passing on a burden or a secret or something.
Right, and that warning is key. It sets the stage for everything that comes next. It makes you think the house itself is the source of all the weird stuff, not just the people in it.
And then what unfolds? Years of paranormal activity. Witnessed by William, his roommates, friends, family members. The most common thing they see is an old woman, described the same way by different people over time. Short, gray hair, dark cardigan, white blouse, and a long skirt. It's like she's just always there, refusing to leave.
And that consistency is what's so important. In paranormal investigations, when you get a bunch of people who don't know each other saying they saw the same thing, it lends more weight to the claims. Especially when the descriptions are so similar, it goes beyond just what one person thought they saw.
Right, it's not just someone's imagination. And it's not just seeing this apparition, we're talking a whole bunch of different activity, from subtle stuff to absolutely terrifying things.
Exactly. This is where things get even more interesting. The activity isn't just one type of thing. It keeps changing and getting more intense over time, like the house itself is becoming more active or the things in it are getting stronger.
Like early on, there's this incident where William is watching a football game with friends, and the sofa he's sitting on lifts up into the air. Just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Super bizarre and unsettling, but it didn't actually hurt anyone.
Yeah, and this could show some kind of playful energy at work, almost mischievous. Some paranormal experts think that entities can interact with the physical world in little ways, testing boundaries or gauging the reactions of the people there.
It doesn't stay playful though, does it? Things get darker after a former roommate dies. William starts feeling a presence, that feeling of being watched. A lot less playful, a lot more unnerving.
That shift is really important. It suggests that the house might be sensitive to strong emotions, maybe acting as a conduit for energy left behind by people who have lived or died there.
So it's not just the house, it's the emotional stuff that sticks around. That's pretty intense. And then things ramp up even more. One night, William is watching TV and sees this massive, shadowy figure behind him in the reflection. I mean, can you imagine? That's straight out of a horror movie.
Yeah, and that brings in a new element, the possibility of a much darker entity, separate from the old woman apparition. Makes you wonder, are there multiple forces at work in this house, each with their own goals and energy?
Like the house is a magnet for different types of spirits. And it's not just apparitions. There are incidents with objects moving on their own, like the light cord in the bathroom being swung around violently, or the 5 knives that just show up in the doorframe, like a thread almost.
Those are really interesting. It makes you think there's some intelligence behind these things, not just random. They seem purposeful, like attempts at communication or even trying to intimidate.
Like someone is trying to get a message across, but we don't know what it is. And it's not just happening in the house. William's brother Darren sees a white, ghostly old woman floating in the garden. Scary stuff.
Right, and the fact that this stuff happens outside the house makes you think the haunting might be tied to the land itself, not just the structure. Could be residual energy from things that happened before the house was even built.
So we've got this creepy history, recurring apparitions, stuff moving on its own, and a general feeling that something is wrong. And all of this is before William starts dating Grace. But when she comes into the picture, things really go crazy. It's like the house is putting on a show just for her.
That's a good point. It introduces the possibility of a connection between the house and the emotions of the people who live there. Some paranormal researchers think strong emotions can be a trigger for activity. It's like a feedback loop. The more fear or excitement the residents feel, the more intense the activity gets.
So it's not just a passive haunting. There's this back and forth, a response to the people.
Exactly. And as we dig deeper into William and Grace's experiences, you'll see just how weird and unsettling this interaction gets. It really makes you rethink what we know about the paranormal and makes you wonder about reality itself.
Yeah, it's like the house is getting smarter almost, more
Yeah.
tuned in to all the energy. And when Grace shows up, things take a hard left.
You got that right. It's not just more of the same weird stuff. It's like the house is really stepping it up a notch, like it's messing with her.
And Grace doesn't just get the subtle hints like William did at first, it's full on, right from the start. It's one thing to hear about footsteps or whispers, but imagine constantly feeling like you're being watched. That's what she starts experiencing almost immediately.
Yeah.
Like the things living in this house are making it known that she's on their turf.
Right. That feeling of being watched is a common thing in a lot of paranormal stories. And it can be the worst part, because you always know you're not alone. Something else is there, watching everything you do.
Like having a creepy roommate who never pays rent, but always wants to know what you're up to. And then there's the whispers. These voices coming out of nowhere.
Whispers are interesting. They often fall into this category called EVP's electronic voice phenomena. Sounds that show up on recordings but aren't from anyone, usually super faint, almost impossible to hear, makes it even creepier.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to figure out a code, trying to understand these messages from somewhere else. And of course, then you have the apparitions. That same old woman just appears over and over. It's like she wants to make sure Grace doesn't miss out on the fun.
And it's not like she just sees her for a second. Grace has a bunch of encounters inside the house, outside the house. She even sees her outside the hallway window one night. Just a reminder that the haunting isn't trapped inside those four walls.
Right. It's like the house and the land are all connected in this spooky world, and the old woman is like the welcome wagon.
And then it gets worse. They start hearing voices whispering outside, wanting to be let in. This takes everything to a whole new level. Not just little hints anymore. This is a straight-up attempt at communication. A request.
Yeah, just picture it. Middle of the night. Voices outside begging to be let in.
Yeah.
Nightmare fuel. Like something from a movie.
And this brings up a lot of questions about what these things are. Are they lost? Just looking for comfort?
Wow.
Or is there something darker going on? Something that wants to cross over to our side?
That's a scary thought. Makes you wonder what their deal is, really.
So at this point, William and Grace know they've got a serious problem. A lot of activity going on. Some people would just bail, get out, and never look back. But they do something different.
Right. They bring in paranormal investigators, the pros, to hopefully get some answers, maybe even some advice on how to deal with it. Pretty brave, considering how bad it's gotten.
Yeah, they want to know what's going on, not just be scared of it. And what the investigators find is really interesting and scary.
They confirm what everyone thought. There's more than one entity in that house, but then they reveal something even crazier. The place itself seems to be some kind of portal, a gateway between worlds.
The portal theory is pretty common in paranormal research. It's used to explain why certain places are hotspots, they're somehow charged, acting like a connection between the world we see and the unseen world.
So it's not just the house that's haunted. It's like the house is sitting on a supernatural magnet, drawing things in from other dimensions or whatever, like a cosmic intersection point. A bunch of energies we can't understand converging there.
And that could explain all the different types of activity in the house. It's not just one thing or one type of spirit. It's like a bunch of different energies and intentions all passing through this portal and leaving their mark.
Yeah, it's like a revolving door of spirits, each one with their own story and their own reason for being there. Makes it even more impossible to figure out what's really going on.
Yeah, the portal idea adds a whole other layer to this. Brings up way more questions than answers. But it might help us understand how crazy and unpredictable all this activity is.
Definitely something to think about. Opens up all these possibilities about the forces at work in our world.
And when we look at this portal idea more, we'll dive into the specific entities that seem to be attracted to the house, think about why they might be there and what effect they're having on William and Grace's lives.
It's like a journey into the unknown. A deep dive into something that changes how we see reality and forces us to ask if there's more out there than we can see. So we've got this house, this portal, and all these things just floating in and out. But what about the woman who owned the house before William? Any connection to the haunting?
That's what you always try to figure out, right? Understanding the history of a place, the people who live there, any big events that happened. Could be clues.
So who was she? This previous owner?
Her name was Miss Tompkins, and she was kind of a recluse. Lived there for decades. Never really came out, according to the neighbors. Very private. Nobody knew much about her.
Interesting. A recluse living in a house that's a total paranormal hotspot. Makes you think.
It could be a thing. Some theories say people who are really sensitive to the paranormal or have a connection to that world can actually draw in activity or make it stronger without even meaning to.
So maybe she was sensitive. Maybe she was into it even. And when she died, that energy stayed behind and became part of the haunting.
Could be. Another idea is the portal was always there and she just added to it. Maybe she became part of it, her energy mixing with all those other entities.
So you've got this recipe for a haunting, the location, the portal, the sensitive person, and maybe even leftovers from stuff that happened before. All these ingredients make the perfect paranormal storm.
And you have to remember, these things aren't always black and white. There's rarely just one reason. It's all these things we can and can't see, coming together to create what we experience.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with some pieces missing. We have to take the bits we know and try to understand the whole thing.
That's why investigating the paranormal is so cool. You're always discovering new things, exploring the unknown, and questioning everything we think we know about the world.
Not for the easily scared, that's for sure. But back to William and Grace. They know they're living in a haunted house, a portal. They've seen it firsthand. Experts confirmed it. What do?
That's the craziest part of this whole story. They decide to stay. They're going to live with this stuff.
Most people would have been out of there so fast. The first ghost or whisper, but not them. They're not running away. They're running towards it.
Says a lot about them. They're strong, open-minded, and maybe they've just accepted that there's more to life than we know.
Shows how resilient people can be. You adapt, you cope, and sometimes you even find a way to feel at peace in all the chaos. Makes you think about how we react to all this paranormal stuff. It's not always fear and running away. Sometimes it's about understanding and accepting.
It makes you wonder, can we really live with this stuff? Is there a way to make it work, to live alongside it? Or is it just going to keep getting worse until it's too much?
Big questions. Maybe we'll never really know the answers. But cases like this one, the story of William and Grace in their house, show us the possibilities, how complicated it is, and how much mystery is still out there in the paranormal world.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we don't know everything. There's so much more to discover, and every case, every story adds to what we know, challenges us to see things differently, and accept all the mysteries that are still out there.
And with that, we'll leave you with this to think about. What would you do if you were living in a haunted house, a portal? Would you run? Would you stay? And what would you learn about yourself along the way? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring the unexplained.